why do you think it's a good idea to cut Medicaid for low-income and working-class people by $700 billion to give $235 billion in tax breaks to the very, very, very richest people in this country, perhaps a few hundred families?
Senator, I don't know, but the Democrats had the trifecta, and there was no tax increase or wealth tax on billionaires.
This is nothing more than a gift to billionaires in this country.
Well, sir, that's just not correct, because the top 10% paid a bigger share of taxes after TC.
Bernie Sanders, longest-serving independent in congressional history, former chairman of the Senate Budget Committee, the man who has spent 50 years fighting income inequality, just laid out the moral math of Trump's agenda in terms that Treasury Secretary could not answer. There are roughly 13 billionaires serving in the Trump administration, and the legislation before Congress hands $235 billion in tax breaks to the top 0.2%, perhaps a few hundred families, by gutting the estate tax. To pay for it, the bill cuts Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act by hundreds of billions of dollars. The Congressional Budget Office estimates millions lose health insurance. Researchers at Yale and Penn estimate tens of thousands die each year as a result. Sanders asks Bessent to justify it. Watch this. If you want to support the channel and get exclusive videos, kindly hit the join button below. That's how we keep this going.
Help me out here. My understanding is the Trump administration has, I think, 13 billionaires in office right now, leading government agencies. Is that about right, do you think?
I have no idea, Senator.
I think that's what the number is. Do you think it's a coincidence, given the large number of billionaires in the Trump administration, that this particular piece of legislation would provide $235 billion in tax breaks to the top 0.2% by expanding the exemptions in the estate tax?
Senator, I will tell you that when the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act passed, my tax rate went up.
Well, I don't know your exact situation, but I can tell you. Tell me about how many people do you think are in the top 0.2%?
Sorry?
Number of people in the top 0.2% who would benefit from this particular $235 billion tax break?
Well, I know the top 10% is
Right.
now paying 7%.
That's not the question.
Of the total tax.
My question is, why do you think at a time of unprecedented income and wealth inequality, when people like yourself economically have never, ever had it so good, why do you think it's a good idea to cut Medicaid for low-income and working-class people by $700 billion to give $235 billion in tax breaks to the very, very, very richest people in this country, perhaps a few hundred families? Please justify that and tell me about that.
Well, Senator, I don't know, but the Democrats had the trifecta, and there was no tax increase or wealth tax on billionaires. You choose.
I'm not talking about a tax.
You chose not to
Mr.
do
Bessent,
that,
I am
so
not
you can
talking
tell
about
me.
a wealth tax. Explain. A few hundred of the wealthiest families in this country, $235 billion tax break. Explain to the American people why you think that's a great idea.
I think that this will increase small businesses substantially. That most small businesses, they are...
Has zero to do with, come on, you're smarter than that. This is the top 0.2%. This is not a mom and pop store. These are multi-billionaires, and the savings go to their kids after they pass away. This is nothing more than a gift to billionaires in this country.
Well, sir, that's just not correct, because the top 10% paid a bigger share of taxes after TC.
I'm talking about one provision in this. I don't want to argue with you about taxes in general. One provision, few hundred families, $235 billion in tax breaks. You can't justify that because morally it is totally unjustifiable. Let me ask you another question. If you guys want to cut $1 trillion in Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act, the estimate from CBO, I believe, is that over 15 million people lose their health insurance. Yale University, the University of Pennsylvania estimated that when you throw that many low-income and working-class people off of health care, some 50,000 people a year will die. Tell me why you think it's a good idea to give tax breaks to billionaires and allow 50,000 low-income and working-class people to die unnecessarily?
Senator, first of all, that's overstated by 5.1 million. That is not attributed to this bill. Is simply
It's a combination. That's true.
No. You all had a scheduled expiration of Obamacare subsidies, and you did not extend that when you were in charge. 5.1 million, 1.4 million illegal aliens on Medicaid.
All right, look,
and there are work requirements. And our goal is to get more money to children and mothers.
Really? Your goal is to get more money to children, yeah, and working people, really, come on. Do you know how many people, and I was surprised to hear this, I don't know if you know it or not, how many people lose their jobs every year, quit, get fired or whatever? Do you have any idea?
Well, there's something called the quits rate, and so when the job market is strong, more people quit.
But yeah, I was surprised that I just researched this. I don't know. Do you happen to know?
I don't know the number.
I was surprised. Would it be shocking to you? It was to me. 20 million people leave their jobs a year. Doesn't shock you, right? It's a big labor force, right?
Yep.
So some guy leaves the job, maybe they move, maybe something happens in their lives, right? We have a lot of transition in the labor market, correct?
Maybe they get a better job.
Right, exactly, maybe they do. Or maybe they have to stay home, their wife gets sick, whatever, we don't know. But 20 million people lose their jobs in a given year, leave their jobs in a given year. Are those people lazy? What happens when I leave my job and maybe I have to move to another state to take care of my ill mother? And I desperately need Medicaid. Am I too lazy now to be able to get Medicaid?
I think that's a mischaracterization of the work requirement.
Really? Well, I'm not quite so sure it is. I don't, okay. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, my main concern is, I think, what people are looking at the economy. The first 100 days, lowest stock market since Richard Nixon, not usually a measure people are shooting for. On tariffs, the fact that last year we had an effective rate about 2.5%. I think the Yale Budget Lab, and I believe you went to Yale, has said that effective rate is closer to 28%, the highest since 1901. I know some of that's changed because the tariffs are on again, off again, some on again, some off again, somewhat chaotic. I believe as your term is what, Crazy Ivan style. I compare them to how a monkey throws dung. You're not exactly sure where they're going to land. And that's the concern I have as a small business owner, and I know Ms. Glusenkamp-Perez is as well. I've got small businesses really worried. You made a comment about while cargo volumes have dropped 60%, you see this as a temporary detox. But for a small business that's getting by day to day, that's much bigger. You talked about Main Street. We want to finally focus on Main Street, not Wall Street. I think you were at a global investor conference in Beverly Hills yesterday. That's the cocktail party where you mentioned the Crazy Ivan theory. And before that, you were at a JP Morgan Chase World Bank private investor summit. All those things are not Main Street, right? Main Street is an auto body repair, a specialty printer. So my concern is on the tariffs. Who pays tariffs, Mr. Secretary? No. Answer the questions I asked, please. I only have 5 minutes. Who pays tariffs?
Sorry, well...
Who pays tariffs?
Sorry.
Mr. Secretary, please.
Excuse me.
The question is very simply, who pays tariffs, Mr. Chairman? I'd like him to answer that question.
Well...
He wants to answer other questions.
Well, Congressman, if the exporters, they dislike tariffs so much, why wouldn't they, if, I think what you're trying to get me to say...
Did you remember the question? I'm not sure you did. Who pays tariffs?
It's a very complicated question.
Reclaiming my time. People pay tariffs, right? Reclaiming my time, Mr. Secretary. Reclaiming my time, Mr. Secretary. Reclaiming my time. You clearly aren't going to answer. I'm not going to waste my time having you go, Mr. Secretary, reclaiming, Mr. Chairman, I asked reclaiming my time.
Tariffs.
Mr. Chairman. And I asked to reclaim my time. Did I not? No, I said reclaiming my time because he's clearly not answering it. So,
reclaim his time so he can ask another question.
Yeah, so as a small business owner, and unfortunately, I'd like that time back since you failed to recognize me for 30 seconds. So I just recently, from one of my suppliers, got the tariff surcharge on things. And in addition to the tariff surcharge, guess what else got raised? American-made walnut plaques. That has nothing to do with tariffs, but companies take advantage and do that. So right now, we are getting screwed right and left because of the indiscriminate use of tariffs. That's the reality for Main Street. And you go off to Beverly Hills for private investor conferences and talk about crazy Ivan theories. Answer that. What is the crazy Ivan theory of tariffs that you mentioned at the summit?
Well, first of all, sir, I've had meetings with more than 50 small lenders. So I want to clarify that. I would also say that in game theory, strategic uncertainty, of which you seem to like the name Crazy Ivan.
Well, it's your words, correct? Didn't you use Crazy Ivan at the?
Well, you've used it 5 times, and
that's the question, Mr. Chairman.
I am saying the strategic uncertainty is part of negotiations. Should we say, here's what we'll accept? Please take this.
Okay, I've got your answer. Thank you. I'm going to reclaim my time again. So for a small business, we don't have that luxury, right? When the ports are empty in California and we can't get goods and people are stocking up for Christmas goods, Crazy Ivan is great for, please don't take this offense, really rich people like you, but for people like me, it's not, right? That's what makes small businesses fail. That's what makes people lose their jobs. That's what makes the stock market tank. So I'll ask one more time, who pays tariffs?
Sir, the history would show that it is a complicated mix of who pays the tariffs over various times.
So that's exactly the problem. If your answer, and you are a very educated person, you have a very impressive bio, cannot answer the question who pays tariffs because you won't answer that, and you say it's a complicated issue, it's not complicated. Consumers pay Trump's tariff tax. That's the reality. And I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman, but I do think next time if I ask to yield back, I would appreciate having my time yield back.
Let's be absolutely clear about what Bernie Sanders just forced onto the record. The legislation Trump's Treasury Secretary is defending takes hundreds of billions of dollars away from the health care of low-income and working-class Americans and hands a comparable sum to a few hundred of the wealthiest families in the country. And when asked repeatedly to justify that trade on its merits, the secretary could not do it. And the argument he builds here is devastating precisely because it's so simple. He begins with a fact. There are roughly 13 billionaires serving in senior roles across the Trump administration. Then he asks whether it's a coincidence that this particular bill delivers $235 billion in tax breaks to the top 0.2% by expanding the exemptions in the estate tax. The estate tax, by definition, only applies to the largest fortunes in the country, and expanding its exemptions means the savings flow to the heirs of multi-billionaires after they die. As Sanders puts it, this isn't a mom-and-pop store. It's a gift to a few hundred of the wealthiest families in America, passed on to their children. Watch how Bessent tries to escape and how Sanders closes each exit. Bessent's first move is personal deflection. He claims his own tax rate went up under the 2017 tax law. Sanders brushes it aside. He's not asking about Bessent's personal situation. He's asking about one specific provision affecting a few hundred families. Bessent then retreats to a general statistic he returns to over and over, that the top 10% now pays a larger share of total taxes. But that's a different subject entirely, and Sanders knows it. The share of taxes paid by the top 10% tells you nothing about whether a $235 billion estate tax cut for a few hundred families is justified. Sanders refuses to argue about taxes in general. He keeps hammering the single provision, explain this one thing to the American people on its merits. Then Bessent tries the small business defense, claiming the change will help small businesses substantially. And this is where Sanders delivers one of his sharpest lines. Come on, you're smarter than that. Because the estate tax at these exemption levels has nothing to do with small businesses. The overwhelming majority of small businesses have estates nowhere near the threshold. This provision is about the largest fortunes in the country, full stop. The second half of the argument is where the moral weight lands. To help pay for these tax cuts, the bill cuts Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act by hundreds of billions of dollars. Sanders cites the Congressional Budget Office estimate that around 15 million people would lose their health insurance. Then he cites research from Yale University and the University of Pennsylvania, estimating that when you strip health coverage from that many low-income and working-class people, roughly 50,000 of them die each year as a result, deaths that would not otherwise have occurred. Sanders puts the question in the starkest possible terms. Why is it a good idea to give tax breaks to billionaires while allowing 50,000 working-class people to die unnecessarily? Bessent disputes the figures, arguing the coverage loss number is overstated, pointing to the scheduled expiration of Affordable Care Act subsidies and citing work requirements. But here Sanders makes his most human point, and it's the one that exposes what work requirements actually mean. He asks Bessent a question the secretary can't answer. How many Americans leave their jobs in a given year? The answer, which surprised even Sanders when he researched it, is around 20 million. People leave jobs constantly. They move, they get laid off, they find better work, or they have to stop working to care for a sick family member. So Sanders poses the scenario. What happens when someone leaves their job to move to another state to care for an ill mother and desperately needs Medicaid during that gap? Under a work requirement, are they now too lazy to deserve health care? Bessent calls it a mischaracterization, but Sanders has exposed the core reality. Work requirements don't target some imaginary population of the permanently idle. They catch ordinary people in the normal transitions of working life at the exact moment they're most vulnerable. The through line of the entire exchange is moral clarity meeting evasion. Sanders isn't disputing abstract economic theory. He's asking one question in a dozen different ways. How do you justify taking health care from millions of working people to enrich a few hundred of the richest families in the country? And the Treasury Secretary, a former billionaire hedge fund manager himself, never answers it because, as Sanders says plainly, it is morally unjustifiable. You can retreat into statistics about tax shares. You can dispute a projection at the margins, but you cannot look at the fundamental trade the bill makes and call it fair. That's why Sanders keeps winning the exchange. Not because he's loud, but because the arithmetic and the morality point in